All right. Oh, Dan's already here. Dan, thank you so much. All right, let's get you on.
Oh,
So everyone, of course, another hugely important discipline when it comes to making games is design. So we have Dan Fisher here from Gameloft, who will get you across the skills and knowledge you'll need to apply on a daily basis if that is a career path that you'd like to pursue. Dan, over to you.
thanks, gents. Yeah, so just quickly about me. I was in the QT Bachelor of Games in Interactive Entertainment degree about 15 years ago. I'm old. And I did about a year of that, got an internship offer through QUT and applied at Halfbrick. And then I was at Halfbrick as an intern and worked on some little DS games, came through as a junior, stepped up to being a GD on some Xbox stuff, so a game designer on some Xbox stuff, all through the Fruit Ninja process, which was crazy. And then ended up being lead designer after about 5 years at Halfbrick on a mobile title. Then moved over to QT The Cube, trying to bring some young kids through, teach them STEM, really inspire them to go into careers in STEM, including games, which was super cool. So I did that for about 7 years. And now I'm at Gameloft, back being a lead designer on a mix of console and mobile titles. So we're pushing to get cross-platform really up and running at Gameloft, which is really cool. But today I really wanted to talk about the process of that. So basically, coming from being an intern all the way through to being a lead game designer and what that entails, and some of the cheat codes, I guess, I learned, and what I look for now in interns as well. So obviously, as a upcoming game designer, you'd be probably looking for intern opportunities, whether they get sent out via mailing lists to the unis or through Screen Queensland, or you find out about them through mixer events like IGEA events, or just hanging out with people in pubs, wherever you sort of find these leads. Try and get your foot in the door for an interview as an intern um, with a games company like Gameloft. What we then look for in interns is willingness to learn the processes around our company. So obviously we want basic skills like the ability to deconstruct a game and show us that you can pick up the features that make a game really successful and their target audiences, things like that. Um, if you're strong in a particular suite like Unreal or Unity, if you've made little games by yourself, that's always a plus. So that's kind of the things we're looking for in an intern. But we're mostly looking for a willingness to learn and being able to shape you into a fully fledged designer. So if you come with like a really bright personality, a willingness to collaborate, and prove yourself in a interview that you can bring these skills, then that's what we're really looking for. There'll often be some kind of gameplay test. Like I know in Halfbrick we did a little test where we would get you to remake Mario but with touch input, and it was quite challenging. So there might be some kind of test to get in the door. They're kind of things we look for from an intern. And as we mold our interns over 6 to 12 months, as they push towards being a junior game designer, we're really looking for their X factor or the thing that they bring to the team that's completely unique that no one else really offers. So it might be a really narrative perspective on game design, or we've got a guy that is just a library of games. He has a Steam library of like 4,000 games. You can ask him about any of them, and he just will tell you the features of that particular game. He's great at deconstruction. Um, and these are the kinds of like unique skills that you need one of on the team that really bolster your career and push you forward. It kind of makes you stand out in the pack. Um, and so as you move into being a junior from an intern, after you've been sort of shaped a little bit, picked up the company culture, um, demonstrated some of these skills, we start to look at you making small impacts on projects. So maybe you do some level design, maybe you do some narrative design, maybe you write some specifications for features. Maybe you do all of it. We try and pick up what you're most comfortable doing, but these are the kinds of things you will be doing. Specification writing is especially strong at Gameloft. So writing a document and really clearly conveying that, let's say you're making a double jump mechanic, having an overview and a structure of how the double jump will work, what impact it will have on gameplay, why it's a good idea so we can sell it to stakeholders and programmers and all these people that we need to get on board to do the feature. Really being good at that documentation level of things is great. And obviously then taking that forward as a junior, we often find that's the hardest part. So juniors are sometimes a little bit shy, or they've just never worked in a team, coming from a uni background or whatever background. It's very hard to all of a sudden collaborate, which is why the final projects that everyone does in uni is a really good proving ground for that. So if you do really excel at the collaboration during your final project, that's really good. We look for that when we're hiring. But yeah, making sure you've learnt the collaborative skills, you can convey to a programmer exactly what you want out of a feature or how the narrative needs to progress to do a particular thing. That's a really important skill to pick up as a junior. And I guess like some people are very gifted at that straight away, and they might spend only 6 months, 12 months as a junior, whereas some people need a bit more time to really flourish in that environment and pick like whether they're going to really excel at narrative or level design or the thing that they're really killing. So it might take them a bit longer, but eventually they'll progress to being a fully fledged game designer. At this stage, what we're super looking for is being able to identify a target audience for a particular feature, really like deconstruct why 6 to 7 year olds are going to gel with something in particular, or if we make XYZ decisions, is it going to hugely impact negatively on the top end of our target audience or reduce playtime for this other audience? So I guess the big difference between a game designer and a junior is that the game designer will often offer insight into exactly the impact that something they're working on will have. So we're making a double jump because the top end of our target audience gets really bored when they're exploring the world because they don't have the tools they want to explore the environment, that kind of thing. So a lot more insight from a game designer. We expect them to follow industry trends a lot more. So just be aware of what is happening. Obviously, like now's not the time to be making another Fortnite, that sort of thing. Or if there's an upcoming genre that's killing it, like merge games were 5 years ago, it's like, oh, let's maybe jump on that. So just having that industry insight, or even the current industry environment is quite tough for a lot of people. So knowing that and being able to support our staff through that and make sure they're not worrying about, layoffs, that kind of thing, because it's an intense time in the industry. So just having a bit more industry awareness as a game designer, as you get a bit more senior, and using that to drive brainstorming sessions with other more junior staff or other coders, artists, running brainstorming sessions to create new features, driving features. So maybe they become the champion of the double jump feature. And they're working with like a little Struct team of an artist and a coder, and they're checking in regularly, making sure the feature's on track and reporting that back to production. Again, documenting really well, making sure the lead designer at that point is across any dramas that they come across. So maybe they change the double jump into a quad jump, and they're like, "Man, it's so cool when you can jump 7 more times." And so instead of just making that call and running off and doing it themselves and getting lost in the weeds, they report back to the lead designer, make sure that's in line with the vision. That's something that juniors can get a little bit lost in. They'll just run off and make a crazy feature without any oversight, whereas a game designer knows when to rein in the scope that they're working with. Um, yeah, and just empowering others to deliver on that vision. As you step up into senior from there, we expect all of those things, but on a much larger scale. So you might be in control of a complete game mode or some large chunk of the game with a lot more autonomy, and you'll be trusted to make good decisions and rein yourself in a little bit as far as scope. So lots more scoping decisions at this level. Often you're relied upon to maybe make an entire narrative situation by yourself. So you might be writing the narrative for an entire level, or an entire chapter of a game, something like that, and how it all connects in. You'll have regular check-ins with the lead, but generally they'll trust you to make the right decisions as you go along. We expect you to start mentoring at this sort of point in your career. So you might be maybe 5 to 7 years into your career, maybe a little bit earlier, but we really expect you to be bringing interns and juniors through on the points that I've discussed previously for those guys. We've just introduced an associate lead position at Gameloft, which is kind of like a lead that was a senior, stepped up into the associate lead position and does minor lead tasks or shadows a lead to pick up on the lead game designer role. And so I'm going to talk about both of them. One's so associates are just shadowing a lead essentially and trying out some of the stuff that I'm about to talk about. But as a lead, you're dealing directly with stakeholders. So you might be dealing with the publisher. You're probably pitching in those meetings. So pitching game ideas. You might be given a pitch to make, which is really quite intense. You might be really struggling with the concept. Someone said you need to take a really popular mobile mechanic and jam it into this console mechanic for this other target audience, and you might have to make that all work together in a very short period of time sometimes. So maybe a couple of days to get a presentation together. You've really got to think on your feet and delegate. So you might need to rely on a senior to give you some ideas for that, that kind of thing. You oversee essentially a whole project. So making sure every part of the project is checked and balanced, making sure it's all fun, playing the build of the game a lot just to review work, making sure everyone's on track. There's also something you kind of share with seniors. You're always encouraging the whole team to play the build as much as they can, but obviously some people like your game designers are quite focused on getting their one part of the game sorted out. So you just need to make sure that it's all connected correctly and all scoped correctly, so people aren't getting out of control, making the Taj Mahal in the corner. Yeah, so that's kind of from intern into lead, the flow, and I'm more than happy to take questions because that was kind of a speed run of how to become a lead game designer.
All right, well, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Put them in the chat and we'll relay them back to Dan. See a lot of cat gifs in the chat.
I mean, you can just meme for 5 mintes, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. No, Dan, do you have a pet?
No, I don't currently.
No,
I used to
okay,
have a cat.
all right. Oh, use it. Okay. All right, so we do have a couple of questions here. There is one asking, are game designers generally allocated a game at a time, or do they work on multiple games at once?
It very much depends on the studio. So at Gameloft, we have everyone assigned to one project. We've got 2 projects happening, but everyone's on one or the other. I've definitely seen studios, especially in the mobile space, where you're prototyping crazy ideas often. A game designer might be across a few projects, especially a lead might be across tons of projects. It very much just depends on the setup of your studio and whether if you're a mobile studio trying to pump out the latest, greatest idea and you're just throwing things at the wall and just seeing what sticks, you might be across tons of projects. Generally, sometimes if a project is tailing off and we're just releasing updates, that might coincide with ramping up another project. So we might have people across maybe 2 projects, but it very much depends on what you're making. Larger titles, you usually assign to just one thing.
That makes sense. Maple Leaf is asking, for someone with no experience, only a year of formal studies in game dev, would you recommend working on some solo projects before trying to get into internships?
Absolutely. So I think one of the reasons I got hired at Halfbrick was that I'd done mapping in Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament 3 way back in the day. And I presented those levels in a little portfolio, and they were pretty happy with that. Like, it was one of the desired skills they were looking for at that time. I don't think that's the only thing that will get you in the door, but it's definitely handy to have. And I would say that you don't need to be programming your own game. Like, a solo project can be a real black hole if you end up trying to do the art and the code, especially when you're young and inexperienced and it's quite hard. I think it's a really good endeavor at some point in your career to try and make a solo project. But if you're going to make something to show off in a portfolio as a designer, it can definitely be like something in the Fortnite, creative, whatever it is, or just mapping for something, or a little narrative for a particular concept you're interested in. You could even write a specification, like a spec of a feature, and I would be really interested in that. That would probably be one of the things that if someone applying for an intern role turned up with a fully written specification that was good, I would be like, yep, you're in, because that's one of the hardest things to write is a really clear specification of a feature that you want someone else to implement. So you want a coder or an artist to take that and run with it. It's incredibly hard to convey that, and we're working on that constantly with our designers. So.
Okay, great, thanks. Another question here, really interesting one. Do you paper prototype initial ideas?
We do. I've been trying to get some cards together currently, actually, to do some layout paper prototyping. We paper prototype all sorts of ideas. I think it's the quickest way to prototype generally, depending. Sometimes if you're trying to do like an RNG based game, it's a little bit harder because the paper prototypes aren't really good for RNG. If you're doing a roguelike or something like that, it might not suit. But even then, you can swap in tiles that you make with A4 pieces of paper or whatever. So sometimes it works really well. You can use dice. But yeah, we definitely do, especially for level layouts. It's so much cheaper to just like write some stuff down on a piece of paper. You can move a tree by just like ripping up the paper and going again, or like rubbing it out with an eraser and redrawing it, whatever. Rather than as soon as you start to get in Unreal or Unity, they're easy, like to move objects around, but you start to get bogged down in tech debt and things like that. So I would definitely recommend paper prototyping.
Yeah, excellent. So there you go. Tried method still being used in large studios. China is asking, do you have any more examples of those unique skills that set designers apart? Are there any standout examples that you've encountered in interns or juniors?
Yeah, it's such an X factor, like golden thing that you don't really know it until you see it. But some of the ones we've got on the team, really good collaborators. So someone might not be perfect at each little design thing that they're doing, but they might just really work really well with others and really be able to convey the idea to an artist or a coder. And so they just excel at collaborating with people, and so you can kind of gear them up with a specification and help them through that process, and then they just go and make things happen, and they're just like a vision holder, like a mini vision holder. So that's awesome to see. I think people that can hold the whole game idea in their heads are really rare. So as a lead, you're kind of expected to do that, but we have some interns or juniors that really understand the full big picture of the game, and you can talk to them about the whole game, and they will respond and say, oh, if you do X, then further down the line, Y or Z isn't going to work. And they've got this really big picture in their head of the game, which is amazing. There's obviously people that cross over. So when I was at QUT, I actually did programming as well as design, so it was a mix. And so I guess I'm sort of a technical designer in a way, so I can step in and help code things when needed. And so that's always a bit of an X factor. Like I can make prototypes on my own, so I can be left in a box to kind of knock out a feature when required, which has been super handy. So if that's something, same with art. There's designers that have come through and they just sketch these like wicked little cartoons of what they're on about, so they can storyboard really well. So they want to achieve something narratively, and you can see it and feel it. It's really great. That's it's these cross-discipline skills or social skills, soft skills that really excel, or just being like really sharp at a particular design skill, like having that depth of knowledge that I was on before, like the guy that just knows every game on the planet and knows everything about them, or is really into a particular scene that's really relevant to your game studio. So if you're going for a job at Riot or Blizzard with Hearthstone or LoL or whatever, like just knowing that particular genre inside and out will help you, and is kind of an X factor in itself. And it can be an X factor for other studios that are trying to break into that space too.
Yeah, great. I'm going to combine two questions here, and they revolve around game design documents. So the first question is, do your game design documents follow a publicly available format, But also, do you actually use game design documents, or do you use wikis? Do you have any preferences? Which one you're using, or which one you avoiding? Any tips from shifting from one to the other?
Yeah, so we use both. I'm currently writing a GDD, which is a lot of fun. I think each GDD represents unique challenges depending on whether it's for mobile, or whether it's for console, whether it's got a different target audience, multiplayer, single player. There's probably so many variables to a GDD that there's not one template I personally use. I've definitely got kind of a single player template that I'm pretty happy with that I use internally. But GDDs often are about the questions you're trying to answer. So target audience would always be in there. The premise of your game would always be in there. The game structure, the core game loop should always kind of be in there. Like all games have these things. So if you just look at sort of things that all games require, I guess that forms a template. I don't know of any on the internet. Maybe I should release one. But I think, yeah, there's definitely sort of a, if you look at the things that all video games have that you need to respond to, if a stakeholder is going to ask you about the project, then that's kind of the questions you're answering. GDDs are funny because they're often, I don't think I've ever seen someone come up with a GDD because they wanted to for their own game. I'm sure they have, but usually you're being asked by either a stakeholder like the publisher or a internal stakeholder like the, if you're doing development for a particular studio. um, and they will ask you for that GDD, and yeah, so you've got to gear it towards what they're after. They might, you might think we're doing this. Let's say Epic is publishing your game. The GDD you write might be geared towards their tech and towards multiplayer if that's what they're after. So it's often a document that you need to curate.
Another question here from Ashley, who's asking, given that there are generally less game designers compared to other roles, such as programmers, would you say game design is one of the harder roles to get into the industry? If so, how does one mitigate this difficulty? And I think you've somewhat alluded already to that, when you're talking about your special skills, but do you have any further advice on that?
Yeah, I often think about this in a, like, how lucky I was to kind of get the role early that I did. It is really competitive, and I think it's really hard because some studios over time can lose touch with design, so it's a really fluid industry position to hold. But if you champion design as a team, I think that that can be really helpful in your studio, sort of as an aside. But as an individual, I think what I most often saw in applications was just being underprepared. So obviously a programmer is going to make a programming example, an artist is going to make an art example. Because design is such a fluid, hard to define skill, I think people feel like they don't need to bring a portfolio or bring examples of their work or that sort of thing. But if an intern turns up for an interview and they've got like a written specification of a feature that they've done, and it's really nicely formatted, an example of some mapping or some level design, some environment layout that they've done, and a little narrative example that they've done, or just like a really strong example in any of those three, you're going to stand head and shoulders above everyone else because, unfortunately, I think like 50% of the people I meet that are interviewing for a job haven't even got an example. They're just kind of like, I'm a good designer, trust me. And it's like, well, no, like I need an example. Like you would need to kill an interview verbally and in person for someone to hire you without showing these things. So definitely a really strong portfolio. And then once you get into the interview, I think a lot of people get nervous or panic, don't take their time. But design is all about thinking and taking your time, measuring your responses, and not just reacting. And so I think it's very hard, but if you can learn the soft skill of absorbing people's information and listening to them in great detail, in like really attentive detail, and then speaking and responding to their questions, or if it's, please design this, please show an example of that. Responding in a really measured way will really help you in an interview and make you stand out compared to a lot of people that rush. And a lot of designers have a lot of really awesome ideas and are overflowing with creativity. And so they have a tendency to interrupt or just not measure themselves. And so I think that's really key for a good designer. And that skill will help you all the way through your career in any room, and whether it's with stakeholders or interviewing for a job or whatever it may be. As a designer, just take your time, think about what you're saying.
Nice. Stuart is asking, does level gray boxing, custom levels in games, game jam, solo project documentation help to improve job prospects as an entry-level/junior designer?
Absolutely. So they're the examples that I would put in the portfolio. Like the white box level that you've made is a perfect example. You can do a video fly through or just a few screenshots. It really helps to put in some little notes. Like, I put this ledge here because it blocked line of sight from this cover fire, and it's a really good vantage point for showing the possibilities off in the distant landscape of where to go. Like, if you put little design notes all through what you've made, that really helps too, to show that you've thought about it, that you're thinking in a critical design way.
Excellent. We do have a question here from Michael, who's asking, would you be able to share an example of a good feature spec? As an indie working with a small team, it'd be nice to see an example of how the pros do it.
Yeah, I can try and get one released or something, or make any. You've inspired me all to release a GDD template and a spec, so people know.
Were there any more questions? I think, Dan, were you able to answer the one about the generalist and how they were able to find their niche?
Right, that was next. Cool. That's a tough one. So, being a generalist versus being a specialist, I think that's where the soft skills come in. So, I don't think I've ever met a generalist that wasn't an amazing collaborator, person that worked with other people. Almost like a producer, I guess I would say, but not quite. Like, still had that design knack and knowledge. But that's probably the way to stand out as a generalist. You've just got to really know target audiences, deconstruction of games, that sort of thing, like the design depth, as well as being able to collaborate with your artists and coders, so that the X factor you bring is being able to make things happen. You're left to your own devices, and you can make a feature happen, even though you might not have designed it, or you might not have coded it or outed it or anything like that. But you can, push people to get the work done with a design twist.
Excellent. Look, let's do one more question because I'm a little bit mindful of time. We do have Jacob from Big End coming up to talk about some art. Just having a look here if we have any more questions. Is there any tips on how to improve collaboration/communication skills if you don't know how many people who work in the field?
That's a great question. I think getting out amongst people, even in social settings. So there's some events that run at pubs and things like that, or the event that gets run at the powerhouse is really cool. Just chatting to people, being self-aware when you're chatting to people. I think it can be very hard to get out of your own head or your body when you're talking to someone, but try and be mindful and think back on a conversation you had. If once it ends, be like, were there any points where I could have gotten more insight out of that person, or were they uncomfortable or rushed at any point? Just taking more care and mindfulness when you're speaking to people, and you can even ask for tips. Like, don't be afraid to talk to someone and be like, I'm really trying to work on my collaboration skills. Like, do you have any tips? How do you feel about how I'm talking to you? Like, especially if they're an industry veteran or they've been around for a while, they're not going to shy away from helping you out, and you might get some really insightful feedback. And at the same time, be open to that feedback. The worst thing you can do is be closed off and take it personally. Like, people are there to help you and help you grow. So really try and leave your feelings at the door a little bit, and be open to feedback, I think, is great. But the more you can talk to people and be social and get out there, the better. And you can do that online as well. You can join some of the game jams, online communities, even if it's an online community for a particular game that you're a fan of. Just be part of that community, and you can even become a moderator, things like that. So.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And look, group projects as well. In your degree, for example, there is a good opportunity to also train your soft skills in your, say, capstone project, your major project, the game that you're making before you graduate. That's a really good opportunity as well for you to train some of those skills, some of those communication skills, listening skills, and collaboration skills, which, as you've heard in various talks, are just really, really important. Look, that's unfortunately all we have time for with Dan. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Another great talk. We'll be right back and we'll have a chat with Jacob about art at Big End. Dan, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be right back.
Thanks, everybody.